Blue tank culprits in incident include personality identities heard of Robert De Niro, Peter Gabriel, Kelly Deal, Arsenio Hall with Al Sharpton, and Barack Obama, and other members of Chicago NAACP with Christopher Allen. Katil Iwerton, ample faction members, the members of Recording Minstrel Fruit Blush, which has been rumored to be acronym for Wolf Under Satan's Hand. Other command level responsibility, culprit, and vicious enemy on YouTube. And by other means, Katil Iwerton of Norway, who is now residing in Peru, high hierarchy member of drug cartel, as an enemy combatant of my nation, within my borders of my nation. Daniel Hahn, chief de facto of Sacramento Police Department, hostile to my just cause cases I am preparing against their police misconduct toward myself. Justin Glipp, Mark and Eric Grubb, proprietor of Paragary's, and personality identity hybrid et al. With him representing to be executive of McDonald's. Trent Reznor and Brian Warner, Officer Castro, and Sue Larson hybrid et al. Doppelganger Network. Hillary and Bill Clinton, the director of Saturday Night Live and Caddy Witch with Heidsix, obsessed with entertainment industry. Aguilar and Bruton with DoD military force under executive de facto action to menace criminally parties of interest, and more too impractical to exhaust the whole list of, and all simultaneously, and riotous tumultuous clamor. Quit that! Current joined acts of incident are retaliatory and hyperreactionary towards my recent actions. For a non-exhaustive list, recent complaint reports against YouTube content of Katil Iwerton with channel by the self-named name Fearsticken. However, according to the Lieutenant Instruction Analysis, he is Morgie Schmorgie Poopsticken because he is not a matchstick, but a bullet-spleeted stick. Party aforementioned as high hierarchical drug cartel residing in Peru. Previously mentioned in record documents of evidence in my cases for purposes of them and for publishing. By my right to publish with free press rights and due process rights and rights of free speech, all meeting when they are not defamation, slander, and malice intent, but are right accusations with just cause in good faith for constructive just purposes. Also, complaint reports against Norwegian black metal material content and Blue Tank members by the name collectively Skinny Puppy. Also, recent AD record documents informing of harassments at Starbucks and Folsom and Howell by multiple Blue Tank parties including Joint Force Headquarters of the DoD, closed locally and illegally off base, with DoD contractor Kelly Deal, prominent in their cyber warfare, illegality of electronic surveillance, misconduct, harassing with interference, incessantly and perniciously, and biowarfare by genetically engineered derivative of anthrax with other agents also combined genetically at location in warfare specifically against myself. Hazardous to the public in the region, with ample nomad historically associated with such a thing called the Manson family in the Manson case, by continuation in the whole continuity of history with. At this juncture, audio recording for this AV production was interrupted by more malicious intrusion interference, terminating the recording remotely in malice intent to disrupt by the interruption of the interference, as recurring pattern of modus operandi previously asserted incalculable number of times through my records, which is a situation that needs to be resolved with deterrence of these criminal harassments against myself. But this is continually prejudiced with ignorance, criminally, and obstruction of justice. I demand be resolved. I will persist to continue as before I was so rudely interrupted, which is a recurring pattern through my whole entire life, including all through elementary school every time there was any reason for me to speak. Being surrounded by Lieutenant insurrectionist culprits in the same conspiracy targeting my life, planted as against myself, Jake, essentially targeted figure, in the conspiracy, which is a divination plot assignment that has been harassing me even since before, by means of divination plot of the occult of devil worshippers, since before even I was born. This needs to be resolved. Okay, now to continue, as before I was so, again, rudely interrupted. I had been referring to actions by AD record documents recently published. Recent information of harassments at Starbucks at Folsom and Howell refer to the record, and also recent AD presentation of the Media Communications Department of Boyd Institute of Jacob James E. Horton, sole practicing executive officer by divine calling in the Lord Jesus Christ. To briefly communicate the title, it was a public domain church piece theater. America hurts the drug epidemic. They are retaliating hostilely to also. You can refer to the record cited here, and also retaliatory and hostile to document publishings of appendices to Reznor, Paragary's, and Scary Earthworm, shortly so titled, that are titled Nice Guy and a Tough Business, informing of Blue Tank insurrectionist activities which had taken place during my life in Cleveland, mostly during 1988, and continuing for a few years thereafter. Inclusion with prominent occult, hierarchy, high-level, command-level responsibility culprit of Britain for Britain's British invasion upon the United States of America. These facts prove Sir Robert Horton, who was Chief Executive Officer of British Petroleum Oil, who, in conspiracy and in collusion with corporation front, conspiratorial front organization, conglomerate corporation, LTV, that my biological father was manager of the auditing department of, being so-called a fraud examiner, but he did actually know work and just only play it, like a cube, which is the reason why he became underemployable and began dealing meth with Barack Obama and Lyle, Illinois, with other parties such as the Jackson family, and shacked up with Scarlett Johansson because he couldn't afford an apartment. But this is not the qualified incompetent myself being persecuted as proto-Orthodox Judeo-Christian. They are hostile to, and a divination assignment plot, thusly explained within. So look, my interests override and outweigh any frivolous claims of petty differentiality in this prejudice against my publishings and disseminations and preparations for cases The conspiracy did involve, although it's not my personal interest at all, but is only relative to the cases, actually, not just only virtually, daily, the whole entertainment industry, including the recording industry, that are enterprises prominently of importance, financed by British Petroleum Oil, and also the mafioso inclusion. All parties of, and by contracts, are in pact with the devil, with this main central pact, essentially hostile to myself, and this is actual truth. In conspiracy that does involve conspiracy as enemy combatants in war acts of sabotage as saboteur, agent provocateurs, and other, while they are all to collude in the plot for protracted manslaughter of myself as a human sacrifice. And this is also inclusion with the Vatican in Rome. This Kitio Ilerton, in approximately 2009, during an economic housing crisis caused by a conspiracy within my nation and from within the government, associated with command-level responsibility, blood relations of mine with last name Horton, and with Henry Kissinger in the Council on Foreign Relations, in a conspiracy that has continued for decades, in collusion with globalists, Russians, communists, and China, and Nazis, and basically occultic globalists of the whole world, per past assertions and more extensively informed of in other previous documents and future documents, had communicated and centrally targeting myself in a conspiracy of electronic espionage myself during a secreted but known by occultic initiatives and paranoid and hysterical about it, a FEMA concentration camp scare as a result of this very complicated scheme that was in process by conspirators during this time, during the end of the Bush administration and continuing into the Obama administration, leading to a conspiratorial G20 summit in Pittsburgh in 2009, where an illegal contract was formed when they sat at the table and lied to each other with the Supreme Ruler and Politburo Committee of China and obviously Russia, and etc. and so on. False propaganda by YouTube when my search engine results were fed with material that is beyond the scope of purpose for this particular document to explain. This will be reported in other documents and in addition to what I have already reported in previous documents. That was hostile to America in a scheme that specifically targeted myself intentionally, that he was a matchstick that would set fire to the United States of America in favor with the interests of China, who had the intent at the time to conquer the United States of America and kill all of its population. The United States government was cooperating with a FEMA concentration camp scheme, exploiting it in conspiracy, exploiting an unconstitutional continuity of government plan that was the subject of Ali North Iran-Contra hearing proceedings. While I was in Washington, D.C. at the particular time, in the same conspiracy, without knowledge by myself at the time, because I was approximately 16 or 17, on a high school band trip for a pretextual and for this purpose, for us to travel there so that I would be there in a conspiracy that is protracted over the whole course of my life, that Ollie North was aware of and that people referred to in the proceeding, including senators. And then Mark Perney, who was a secret agent at the time, who was in high school a second time, pretending to be a high school student, questioned me about it. This is very complicated. Mark Perney, who was an associate with Trent Reznor at the current time back then in the late 80s, while I was in high school, in a satanic plot against myself as agents in my high school, with the whole occultic network when my genealogical family, the Hortons, are predominant in it, being high-level Satanists, in a globalist conspiracy of global government that is treasonous to the United States of America that Henry Kissinger has always been a part of. And now Scott Horton, an associate of his in the Council on Foreign Relations, is party to. And all of the false propaganda scheme that is for disinformation and for purposes and is very hypocritical, including the other Scott Horton in Auburn, Texas, on anti-war radio. Full explanation of all of this is beyond the scope of purpose for this particular document to be brief. A basis for China's threats was exploiting the conspiratorial within our government borrowing of money and raising such a high deficit of trillions of dollars. When this was all in the plan, when they planned on killing most of the population, and then while planning this, they began a fraudulent scheme to offer low down payment loans for houses to all a mass of people that were on a list to be killed. When, by my act during this time, this scheme was averted, while Kitio Ilerton was a party harassing me to cause intentional infliction of emotional distress and other maliciously hostile to my person, communicating threats indirectly and cryptically to myself in collusion with these other high-level, command-level responsibility culprits, with a message consistent with, as I mentioned. This caused a crisis with a shock to our economy when the plan at the particular time was averted. They've continued with a scheme of more gradually killing off people in a secreted guerrilla warfare, which includes plots of malicious prosecution against innocent people in the scheme. I am the central target of all of this. Oh, and there is, what is her name again? Oh, Megan O'Sullivan, who was the National Security Advisor under Bush, and she's harassing me right now, really hostile, reacting to this, my saying this, who is heavily involved, who's in the satanic cult that rituals also in Toronto with members of Rush and Skinny Puppy Canadian parties, with Hortons, because that is all high-level Satanist enterprise of prominently members of my family that are high-level high priests of the satanic occultic hierarchy, that I am innocent concerning their involvement, because just because I'm in the family doesn't mean that I'm involved with this with them, and I oppose, and I always have, and I've never been involved with it. When, as the target of sacrifice by ritual abuse, since all of their efforts ever to human sacrifice myself have always been averted by the power of the Lord and his divine protection, they continue a scheme perniciously and obstinately to try to kill me in a conspiracy to commit protracted manslaughter, and which thus far hasn't succeeded and will not succeed for a very long time. It increments more severe and more severe and more severe and more severe as the central obsession of all the occult network. Back to Kjell Eilertson. He did communicate to the general public, but with the intent of essentially targeting myself cryptically in favor of China in this matter. Hostile to the United States of America and Bruton and Aguilar and many other and all of these that are of the conspiracy within the government, including executive de facto, illegitimate because he is treasonous, is in this global conspiracy with such as Russia and China against actual American interests and national security interests, and all of their claim for national security interests are completely frivolous, and my interests outweigh and override by law, actually. Any more on this subject is beyond practical scope. This is getting too long. Except to say, any favoring of these other parties in this matter is treasonous and hostile to actual American interests and interests of the national security of the actual United States of America in favor of these globalist treasonous conspirators. I will not have this partiality. Germane to the erroneous basis for the motives and intents of these lieutenant parties in this incident for their invalid prejudicial claims, being in favor with such as China and globalist conspiracy, although that is not an exhaustive list of all parties and entities they are in collusion with, per the corroborated parallel evidence from the public demonstration of the treasonous state action, which is Lieutenant scatological at issue with severe clear present danger and cruel and unusual punishment harassments, since the entity China and all of its governors and so forth and populace, since it has been fomented to be by its government, which is tyrannical and despotic, with very repugnant to American principles for its jurisprudence and law, and particularly Xi Jinping, are obsessively hostile and are involved in the incident and its action by his personality identity, which I am aware is hybrid at all with such as a Mark Fedosik and other doppelganger agent operatives, and my actions and by web publishing of the Institute of VoIP with its American principles in the interest of the national security of the United States of America and its constitutional integrity. These are colluding to be in union with such globalists as China that are hostile essentially to my person and the institute I have formed with its purposes and objectives and my legal cases with un-American legal claims, which are completely unconstitutional and in violation of the Bill of Rights, and other favor and partiality with them is completely totally treasonous ipso facto prima facie. For in addition, I am aware that China has to the world declared war against the United States of America already, but is repressed in the media within the United States by this lieutenant conspiracy within our government, within my nation. Scratch that, within the government de facto existing within the borders of my nation. Correction. Their claims are completely treasonous, differential and prejudicial to myself on these invalid grounds, totally completely frivolous. China has declared before the whole world war already. Obviously, interloper Biden is inclusion. It is repressed in our media. Excuse me, the media within the borders of my nation. I don't know why I said R, because I have nothing to do with it. This is very complicated. I am disseminating and distributing communications by the media communications department of the institute I am sole practicing executive of that I have established, the Institute of VoIP Administration. They are hostile to it. Hostile to the national interest of my nation within the borders of my nation. All in favor of these other entities are completely treasonous ipso facto prima facie. It has been declared on Australian Sky News before the whole world. This is also when I am aware by social engineering that high command level responsibility culprits within my genealogical family, and with Henry Kissinger and other parties too exhaustive beyond scope purpose to mention here, are in collusion with the triad organized crime group in globalist conspiracy of China and its Chinatowns within my nation, and to have formed and organized such as gangs that are criminal. These consistently tend to be in favor of their upper leadership, but this is treasonous in your criminal gangs, such as Obama has been party of. In Chicago, he was illegitimate as a campaigner for the presidency with a claim that he was qualified as a community organizer, when it really was of organized crime gang leadership that this claim was relevant to, which is not valid for being a politician. They will claim innocence on what has been openly communicated to the public and by such as literature in his book and biography, but this is the real truth. They will escapistically deny.